Perfect Love, Imperfect Relationships, Healing the Wound of the Heart, a book by John Welwood, narrated by and read by Dee. Jump to your feet, wave your fists, threaten and warn the whole universe that your heart can no longer live without real love. Hafiz. Introduction to the book Perfect Love, Imperfect Relationships by John Welwood. A night full of talking that hurts. My worst held back secrets. Everything has to do with loving and not loving. Rumi. The words I love you, spoken in moments of genuine appreciation, wonder, or caring, arise from something perfectly pure within us. The capacity to open ourselves and say yes without reserve. Such moments of pure open-heartedness brings us as close to natural perfection as we can come in this life. The warm and radiant yes of the heart is perfect, like the sun, in bringing all things to life and nourishing all that is truly human. Yet, oddly enough, even though we may have glimpses of a pure, bright love dwelling within the human heart, it's hard to find it fully embodied in the world around us, especially where it matters most in our relationships with other people. Indeed, for many people today, risking themselves in a love relationship has become a frightening proposition. A near certain prescription for overwhelming pain or emotional devastation. Scratch the surface of our sex and romance craze culture, and you will find a sense of disillusionment in many people where they feel, as one pop song puts it, that love stinks. Or as a young woman in one of my workshops expressed it, if love is so great, why are relationships so impossible? Don't tell me I need to open my heart anymore. My heart is already too open, and I don't want to keep getting hurt. So, right alongside the truth of love's perfection, there stands another, more difficult truth, the flawed, tangled web of human relationship, which gives rise to tremendous frustration, sorrow, and anger everywhere we look. One minute you're in touch with the love of your heart, you feel open, caring, and connected. And the next minute, before you know it, you and your loved one have become embroiled in a conflict or misunderstanding that leads to shutting down or behaving in a heartless way. Thus, even when our love is genuine and real, something often seems to block its full and perfect expression in relationships. I love you, but I can't live with you, is the classic statement of this painful gap between the pure love in our heart and the difficult relationships we inhabit. This disparity presents a maddening riddle, which each of us must solve or be torn to bits, as D.H. Lawrence suggested. This riddle shows up in many different guises. Even though love forever arises anew, most of us walk around feeling deprived of it, as if starving in a land of plenty. And while love can bring tremendous joy, a love life often brings our greatest suffering. Even though there is nothing as simple and straightforward as the warmth of the heart, still, for one human being to love another, this is the most difficult of all our tasks. As the poet Rilke wrote, and while in one sense love conquers all, war nonetheless remains a governing force in world affairs. The sense of loneliness and deprivation afflicting many people's lives is not because love is in short supply, for you can find love everywhere you look, in one form or another. Every smile and most of the conversations and glances you exchange with the people you encounter every day contain at least a few grains of love in the form of interest, appreciation, consideration, warmth, or kindness. Add up all the interchanges you have with others every day, and you will see that your life is sustained by a flow of interconnectedness, which is the play of love at work. There is no force in the world but love, as Rilke writes. Yet, if love is the greatest power on earth, the force that sustains human life, which in some sense it certainly is, why hasn't love's radiant warmth been able to banish the darkness engulfing the world, and transform and uplift this earth? Why is it so hard for love to permeate the dense fabric of human relationships? If love is our greatest source of happiness and joy, why is it so hard to open to it fully and let it govern our lives? What is the problem? These questions took on particular urgency for me soon after September 11th, when the world was once again plunging into war, as the bombs rained down on Afghanistan in retaliation of the terrorist attacks. After America's political leaders embarked on what appeared to be a war without end, I felt an imperative to take a fresh look at why it's so hard for what is best in the human being, the warmth and goodness of the heart, to take hold in this world. I've previously written 2 books on conscious relationship, Journey of the Heart and Love and Awakening, that show how to embrace and work with the challenges of relationship as opportunities for personal transformation and spiritual awakening. This book takes a different tack. It focuses on the root source of all relation problems, the mother of all relationship issues, a wounded relationship to love itself. The mood of unlove. There are hundreds of books in the market that offer relationship fixes in one form or another. Some of these techniques can be quite helpful. Yet at some point, most technical fixes turn out to be patches that fall off, or they fail to address what lies at the root of all interpersonal conflict and misunderstanding, whether between marital partners, family members, fellows, friends, fellow workers, or different ethnic groups in the world at large. All the most intractable problems in human relationships can be traced back to what I call the mood of unlove, a deep seated suspicion most of us harbor within ourselves that we cannot be loved, or that we are not truly lovable just for who we are. The basic insecurity makes it hard to trust in ourselves, in other people, or in life itself. Not knowing in our blood and bones that we are truly loved or lovable undermines our capacity to give and receive love freely. This is the core wound that generates interpersonal conflict and a whole range of familiar relationship tangles. Difficulty trusting, fear of being misused or rejected, harboring jealousy and vindictiveness, defensively stonewalling, having to argue and prove you're right, feeling easily hurt or offended, and blaming others for our pain. These are just a few of the ways that our insecurity about being loved or lovable shows up. The mood of unlove often shows up in the form of sudden emotional flare ups in reaction to any hint of being slighted or badly treated. It's as though a reservoir of distrust and resentment were ready and waiting to be released, which the tiniest incident can trigger. Even caring and compassionate people often carry within them a fair share of unlove and righteous grievance, which can suddenly erupt under certain circumstances. For some couples, these explosions happen early on, blowing a budding relationship apart in their first few encounters. For others, the mood of unlove might not wreak its havoc until well into a seemingly happy marriage, when one or both partners suddenly wake up one day and realize they don't truly feel seen or known. It's not uncommon for long term spouses to say something like, I know my husband loves me, but somehow I don't feel loved. Sometimes the mood of unlove shows up in the form of endless bickering and petty irritation, as though both partners were continually looking for reasons to grumble. Why don't you love me better? For example, one couple I worked with described the following incident that led to a week-long estrangement. The woman had just made her husband tea when he became upset with her for putting milk in it. Haven't I told you before that I don't want you putting milk in my tea for me? That I like to let it steep for a long time first? The only way to understand how something so trivial could trigger a major conflict is through recognizing what her action signifies for him. In his eyes, she has shown once again that she is not attuned to him and his needs, like all the other women in his life, starting with his mother. And for her, when even making him tea becomes an occasion for blame and resentment, this shows once again that no matter what she does, she can never win his love. Lurking in the background of this petty incident is the age old pain of feeling uncared for and unappreciated, which both partners are reenacting once again. As a practicing psychotherapist, I have been intrigued by the tenacity and intransigence of the mood of unlove, which can live on in the psyche in spite of plenty of evidence to the contrary. Even when people in our lives do love us, or in spite of many years of psychotherapy or spiritual practice. What's worse, the mood of unlove has the power to repel, belittle, or sabotage whatever love is there. Somehow the love that's always available seems to fall short. It's not sufficient, not good enough, or not the right kind. Somehow it fails to convince us that we are truly loved or lovable. In this way, the mood of unlove, as an expectation that we won't or can't be fully embraced or accepted, makes us impervious to letting in the light, the love, makes us impervious to letting in the love that might actually free us from this grip. As a result, you have two choices in life. You can stay single and be miserable, or get married and wish you were dead, as H.L. Mencken wrote with flourish of wry black humor. Reciting this line at relationship workshop always evokes peals of laughter as people feel the relief of naming this basic human dilemma. When under the spell of the mood of unlove, living alone is miserable because we feel bereft or abandoned. And yet, marrying is no cure for this misery, since living with someone every day can further intensify the sense of unlove and make it feel even more hellish. How then can broken-hearted people like ourselves heal this woundedness around love that has been passed down through the generations and set ourselves free from the strife that dominates our world? This is the most crucial issue of human life, both personally and collectively. It is also the central focus of this book. The nature and significance of love. I would define love very simply as a potent blend of openness and warmth, which allows us to make real contact, to take delight in and appreciate, and to be at one with ourselves, others, and life itself. Openness, the heart's pure, unconditional yes, is love's essence, and warmth is love's basic expression, arising as a natural extension of this yes, the desire to reach out and touch, connect with, and nourish what we love. If love's openness is like the clear, cloudless sky, its warmth is like the sunlight streaming through the sky, emitting a rainbow like spectrum of colors: passion, joy, contact, communion, kindness, caring, understanding, service, dedication, and devotion, just to name a few. According to the saints and mystics, love is the very fabric of what we are. We are fashioned out of this warmth and openness. We don't have to be great sages to recognize this. All we need to do is take an honest look at what makes our life worthwhile. When the presence of love is alive and moving in us, there is no doubt that our life is on target and meaningful, regardless of our outer circumstances. We feel that we are in touch, connected with something larger than our small self. This lifts the burden of isolation and alienation off our shoulders, filling us with peace and well being. But when the presence of love is absent, something often feels sad, not quite right. Something seems to be missing, and it's hard to find much joy, even in the midst of favorable circumstances. We easily fall prey to meaningless anxiety or despair. These simple truths are also upheld by neuroscience research, which confirms that our connections with others affect the healthy development and functioning of the brain, the endocrine and immune systems, and our emotional balance. In short, love is the central force that holds our whole life together and allows it to function. In the words of the Indian sage Nisargadatta Maharaj, life is love and love is life. While women generally recognize the central place of love in everything, men are more often more reluctant to acknowledge this. Please don't reduce everything to that. I can hear many male readers groaning. I have more important business to attend to than feeling loved. But think about it. The author who writes a bestseller, the politician who wins an election, the businessman who gains a promotion or important contract all feel good about themselves because a little love has flowed their way in the form of recognition, praise, or appreciation. Even the trader who reaps a stock market windfall feels that the gods are smiling on him. At bottom, most of the things we strive for, security, success, wealth, status, power, recognition, validation, praise, are ways of trying to fill a gaping hole within us, a hole formed out of our separation from love. As ways of trying to win love indirectly, these substitute gratifications do not truly nourish us because they do not deliver the real thing. In that sense, they are like junk food. Their failure to truly nourish only intensifies our inner hunger, driving us to run all the harder on the hamster wheel of success, desperately hoping to win some reward that will truly satisfy. Yet, if love is so central to who we are, why do we often feel so separated from it? All the great spiritual traditions have addressed the question of why people treat each other so badly and the world is such a mess. They have provided various explanations for this, such as ignorance, bad karma, original sin, egocentricity, or the failure to recognize love as our very nature. Yet, what is the root cause of these afflictions? the wound of the heart. If we take an honest look within, we may notice a certain guardedness around our heart. For some people, this is a thick, impenetrable barricade. For others, it is a thinner, subtler, protective shield or contraction that only emerges under threatening conditions. And nothing triggers the sense of threat so strongly as the suspicion discussed earlier that we are not really loved or acceptable as we are. Numbing or shutting down the heart is an attempt to deflect the pain of that. Not knowing that we can be loved for who we are prevents us from trusting in love itself, and this in turn causes us to turn away from life and doubt its benevolence. We may tell ourselves that love is not really available, but the deeper truth is that we don't entirely trust it, and therefore have a hard time fully opening to it or letting it all the way into us. This disconnects us from our own heart, exacerbating a sense of love scarcity. This disconnection from love most often grows out of not feeling fully embraced or accepted in our family of origin, whether through neglect, lack of attunement, or outright abuse. Not feeling securely held in the arms of love, we fall into the grip of fear. Inadequate love and nurturance directly impact the child's sensitive nervous system, resulting in a certain degree of shock or trauma that will affect us for the rest of our life. Sometimes the wounding or separation from love happen in more subtle ways. Some parents seem loving enough, yet they covertly or unconsciously dispense their love in controlling or manipulative ways. Or they may be attuned to the child as someone different from them, a separate being in his or her own right. Such children may feel love for certain attributes, but not for who they really are. In the need to please their parents and fit in, they come to regard love as something outside themselves, which they have to earn by living up to certain standards. Children naturally try to protect themselves from the pain of inadequate love as best as they can. They learn to separate and distance themselves from what causes them pain by contracting or shutting down. The technical term for this is dissociation. Dissociation in our minds is our mind's way of saying no to and turn away from our pain, our sensitivity, our need for love, our grief and anger about not getting enough of it, and from our body as well, where these feelings reside. This is one of the most basic and effective of all the defensive strategies in the child's repertoire. Yet it also has a major downside. It constricts or shuts off access to two main areas of our body: the vital center in the belly, the source of desire energy, eros, vital power, and instinctual knowing, and the heart center, where we respond to love and feel things most deeply. In saying no to the pain of unlove, we block the pathways through which love flows in the body and thus deprive ourselves of the very nutrient that would allow our whole life to flourish. And so we wind up severing our connection to life itself. This leaves us in a very strange and painful dilemma. On one hand, we hunger for love, we cannot help that. Yet at the same time, we also deflect it and refuse to fully open to it because we don't trust in it. This whole pattern, not knowing we are loved as we are, then numbing our heart to ward off the pain, thereby shutting down the pathways through which love can flow into and through us, is the wound of the heart. Although this love wound grows out of childhood conditioning, it becomes in time a much larger spiritual problem, a disconnection from the loving openness that is our very nature. This universal human wound shows up in the body as emptiness, anxiety, trauma, or depression, and in relationships as the mood of unlove, with its attendant insecurity, guardedness, mistrust, and resentment, and all relationship problems flow from there. Love and the wound of the heart always seem to go hand in hand like light and shadow. No matter how powerfully we fall in love with someone, we rarely soar above our fear and distrust for very long. Indeed, the more brightly another person lights us up, the more this activates a shadow of our wounding and brings it to the fore. As soon as conflict, misunderstanding, and disappointments arise, a certain insecurity swells up from the dark recesses of the mind, whispering, "See, you're not really loved after all." On the collective level, this deep wound in the human psyche leads to a world racked by struggle, stress, and dissension. Communities and social institutions at every level, marriages, families, schools, churches, corporations, and nations all across the globe, are in disarray, divided against themselves. The greatest ills on the planet, war, poverty, economic injustice, ecological degradation, all stem from our inability to trust one another honor differences, engage in respectful dialogue, and reach mutual understanding. Thus, all the beauty and the horrors of the world arise from the same root, the presence or absence of love. Not feeling loved and then taking that to heart is the only wound there is. It cripples us, causing us to shrivel and contract. Thus, apart from a few biochemical imbalances and neurological disorders, the diagnostic manual for psychological afflictions, known as the DSM, might as well begin. Herein are described all the wretched ways people feel and behave when they do not know that they are loved. All hatred of ourselves and others, all our fear, egoism, communication problems, and sexual insecurities, all the pathology, neurosis, and destructiveness in the world, and the whole nightmare of history, with all its bloodshed and cruelty, boil down to one simple fact. Not knowing we are loved and lovable makes the heart grow cold. And all the tragedy of human life follows from there. When people do not know they are loved, a cold black hole forms in the psyche, where they start to harbor beliefs that they are insignificant, unimportant, or lacking in beauty and goodness. This icy place of fear is what gives rise to terrorist attacks of all kinds, not just in the form of bombs going off, but also in the emotional assaults that go on within ourselves and our relationships. Outer terror is but a symptom of inner terror. When people feel unloved or mistreated, they look for someone to blame, someone on whom they can take out their bad feelings. Through war and terrorism are Though war and terrorism are usually regarded as political issues, the fact is that people in whom love is flowing freely do not throw bombs. Terrorism, like war itself, is a symptom of the disconnect from love that infects our world. Unless we can eradicate this plague by healing the mood of unlove that has been passed down through the generations, the rule of fear and terror will never be overcome on this earth. A war on terrorism is an oxymoron, an impossibility, because you cannot eliminate terror through war, which only creates more terror. Only in an environment of love can we feel truly secure from attack, when we must love one another or die, as W. H. Auden wrote in a poem at the outbreak of the World War II. I recognize that some readers may regard it as naive and unrealistic to introduce truths about love into discussions of political issues such as war and terrorism. Of course, wars, ethnic conflicts, and social injustice require political solutions. At the same time, political settlements that lack genuine caring and respect for all parties eventually fall apart and lead to new conflicts. Leading religious and social activists have often understood the proclivity to war as a symptom of alienation from love and emphasized the central role that love must play in solving the problems of the world. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. recognized the role that Grievance plays in generating wars, arguing that only love can cure this illness. Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace. If this is to be achieved, man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. This is a noble sentiment, yet how can humanity actually overcome its addiction to violence and its cynicism about love? What I suggest in this book is that war arises from grievance against others, and that this grievance is rooted in our love wound, which we blame on others, taking it out on them. This book lays out a practical path for deeply understanding and addressing this core human problem. Love and Grievance. My initial response to the terrorist attack of 2001 and the war fever they unleashed was anger and indignation. Yet I soon saw that my reaction was part of the same problem that troubled me in the world at large. The terrorists had their righteous grievance against America. The American government had its righteous grievance against the terrorists. And like these warring parties, I too had a righteous grievance against a world addicted to war and vengeance, and against purveyors of hatred on all sides. Despite my fervent wish for a world at peace, as long as I regarded terrorists and warmongers as some kind of adversary to harbor a grievance against, I too was putting on the mantle of war, seeing how my investment in grievance was the very same thing that drives all the hatred and violence in the world, catapulted me into a process of soul searching and inner discovery. My desire to understand how love's gold turns into lead forced me to take a long, hard look at grievance. In studying my own investment in grievance and how it operated in my relationships, I saw that something in me found great satisfaction in setting up an other, someone or something, over against myself, and then making this other wrong. While making myself the injured party, standing in righteous judgment, there was something about harboring a grievance, I had to admit, that was really quite compelling. Everywhere we look, we find people indulging in the mindset of grievance. Our marriage, our families, schools, and workplaces all have become battlegrounds where people spend large amounts of precious life energy at war with one another, blaming and getting even. Then there is grievance politics, where political campaigns manipulate people's dissatisfaction and anger, targeting convenient scapegoats as a way to win votes. Meanwhile, on the world stage, various religious and ethnic groups continually engage in recrimination and retaliation against one another. This tendency to set up adversaries to contend with is also at work inside ourselves. Perhaps you do daily battle with your job, regarding it as a devouring monster that threatens to consume you. Or maybe you struggle with your to do list and various pressures in your life, the traffic, the weather, the difficult feelings coursing through you, or even life itself. Most painful of all is the inner battle that rages within your mind and body when you make yourself wrong or bad, which generates tremendous emotional stress and self hatred. Some people even become so pitted against themselves that they wind up killing the monster they imagine themselves to be. Why this compulsion to create adversaries and nurse grievances when it only winds up destroying us and those around us? As I sifted through the layers of my grievance against the world in the aftermath of terrorist attacks, I recognized an old sense of not belonging to this world, which I could trace back to childhood. I had felt like an alien while growing up because the adults around me seemed more interested in fitting me into their own agendas and then in finding out who I might be. As a result of having to push my mother away because she could not let me be me, I had separated myself from love and remained on guard against it throughout the early decades of my life. Consequently, I had learned to develop my intellect, at least in part, as a way of dissociating from the pain of this disconnection from love. Yet, much deeper than any need to write, to accomplish, or to make a mark in the world, there was an undeniable longing that was humbling when I faced it in its unvarnished simplicity. At the root of everything I did, I had to admit what I wanted most was to love and be loved. At the bottom of my grievance against a world gone mad, I discovered the vulnerable child who still didn't know that love was fully available or truly reliable. Even though I seemingly had plenty of love in my life and had explored and written about intimate relationships for many years, I nonetheless uncovered a dark, hidden corner in myself where I did not entirely trust love. And I saw that this was where grievance took root, in this place where I stood pitted against a world that didn't seem friendly. Here in myself, I was face to face with the same resentment that poisons a whole world, breeding all the blame and recrimination that eventually lead to violence, divorce, vendettas, and war. Recognizing this link between the mood of unlove and the mood of grievance within myself gave me a deeper understanding of why love continually goes awry in human relationships. Wanting to explore this further, I decided to bring the question of grievance to the students in a class I was teaching while the terrorist attacks were still fresh and the level of fear and outrage was running high. I began by asking them to focus on a stressful situation in their lives. Then I asked them to look at how their current stress was linked to setting themselves in opposition to something they treated as an adversary. Some people chose a relationship or work related situation to focus on. Others took the terrorist acts, our government response, or the chaos in the world. My students found it illuminating to see how, in each case, their attention grew out of saying no to something they were treated as an adversary. I'll repeat, my students found it illuminating to see how, in each case, their attention grew out of saying no to something they were treating as an adversary. Next, I asked them to see if they could find in the struggle some old familiar grievance against others that went back all their life. And I asked them to state this grievance in one sentence in the present tense, starting with you. Here are some of the grievance statements they came up with. You want to take advantage of me. You don't value me for who I am. You don't care about me. You're only interested in yourself. You want to control me. You don't see me. You don't respect me. You want to do me in. You don't accept me unless I fit into your agenda. You use me for your own needs. You don't give me your time and attention. You make me wrong for what I need. You don't recognize my goodness. As people took turns stating their grievance, it became clear that these were all different forms of the same complaint, the most fundamental sorrow that there is. You don't love me. More specifically, you don't love me as I am. This is the universal wound that fuels our fights with the world. Love is a recognition of beauty. Each of us longs to love, uh, each of us longs to know and feel confident in the beauty and the goodness that lies within us. Especially as children, we needed someone else to see the beauty of our soul and to reflect this beauty back to us like a mirror, so we could see and appreciate it ourselves. When the beauty of who we are was not recognized, we felt the absence of love, and our system went into shock and shut down. For reasons we could not fathom, other people, God, or life itself seemed to be depriving us of the recognition and understanding we instinctively knew we needed in order to thrive. This was maddening, maddening. We knew that love was rightfully ours and that we needed to be at one with it, to feel it filling and permeating us through and through. Someone or something was surely to blame. So we formed a grievance against other people or life itself for not providing the love we needed, or against ourselves for not having succeeded at winning that love. Great love. It's true we are entitled to perfect love. It's our birthright. But the problem is that we are looking for it in the wrong places. Outside ourselves, in our imperfect relationships with imperfect people who are wounded like we are. This inevitably leaves us frustrated and disappointed. Even though perfect love can shine through relationships in moments, we cannot count on other people as a consistent source of it. Yet, even though human love usually manifests imperfectly, there is another dimension of love that is perfect, unbroken, and always available. It flows directly into the heart from the ultimate source of all, where whether we call that God, Tao, or Buddha nature. This is great love, absolute love, pure, unconditional openness and warmth, which actually abides at the very core of our nature. If great love is like the sun, our woundedness is like a cloud cover, temporarily blocking its rays. Fortunately, just as the sun cannot be damaged by clouds, so our native capacity for warmth and openness cannot be destroyed. Thus, healing the wound of the heart does not require fixing something that is broken. Having a wounded heart is more like being lost, lost in the clouds that temporarily blocks access to the sun that is always shining. Though we can spend a whole lifetime lost in these clouds, that doesn't mean that the sun itself is lost or damaged. Healing the love wound, then involves making ourselves available to the sun that it may do what it naturally wants to do, shine upon us. Letting love in. Most religions try to remedy the problem of human lovelessness by admonishing us to love more generously. The way to be loved, they say, is first to love. To him who hath shall be given. 'Tis better to give than to receive. This core principle of spiritual life certainly contains profound truth. Yet there is another truth that stands alongside it. We cannot give what we cannot receive. Just as the earth is abundant because of its ability to receive and absorb light from the sun and rain from the sky, so we can only give forth love abundantly if we're able to receive it, soak it up, and be nourished by it. If we don't feel loved within ourselves, then how can we ever truly love? If our wounding prevents us from letting love in, then how much do we have to give? To love is to cast light, Rilke writes, while to be loved means to be ablaze. Who is to say that being ablaze is any less holy than casting light? And how can we cast pure light if we are not ablaze? Thus, the key to loving is to become more permeable to love, to let it all the way into us so that it can live and breathe from inside out. Even if we believe that God is love or that we have a moral duty to love our neighbor, such beliefs will have little effect as long as our in channel is shut down or constricted, preventing great love from flowing freely into and through us. Countless books have been written about how to do a better job of loving. This book is different because it will help you focus instead on our capacity to receive love and how you can go about opening up that capacity. There is a secret about human love that is commonly overlooked. Receiving it is much more scary and threatening than giving it. How many times in your life have you been unable to let in someone's love or even pushed it away? Much as we proclaim the wish to be truly loved, we are often afraid of that. and so find it difficult to open to love or let it all the way in. One way that couples often deal with the fear of receiving love is to split into two poles, one partner becoming the pursuer and the other the distancer. Although it looks as though the distancer is the one who's afraid of letting love in fact, both sides are choosing control over receptivity. Pursuers remain in control by demanding, seducing, or chasing, after all of which keep them from having to melt and open. They are often frightened of having to receive and respond, which is why they would rather do the chasing. Distancers remain in control by withholding. While each side complains about the other, they are in fact doing the same thing, engaging in a strategy that avoids the risk of opening fully to love. A psycho-spiritual approach. In my work as a psychotherapist, I've discovered the power of bringing together both psychological and spiritual principles in the process of healing and growth. Psychological work focuses more on what has gone wrong, how we have been wounded in our relations with others, and how to go about addressing that. Spiritual work focuses more on what is intrinsically right, how we have infinite resources at the core of our nature that we can cultivate in order to live more expansively. If psychological work thins a cloud, spiritual work invokes the sun. This book brings these two approaches together, presenting a psycho-spiritual approach to transforming the wound of the heart. On the psychological level, this book offers a distinctive set of understanding concrete methods for addressing your personal wounding around love and releasing your old grievances so that you can let love flow more freely and in through you. On the spiritual level, it will help you develop your capacity to open to hold your most difficult experiences in a space of love, and beyond that, to tap into the great force of absolute love that is your very essence, so that it may infuse and illuminate your life from within. Working on both these levels, addressing your psychological wounding and learning to access great love, will help you relate to yourself, others, and all of life with a more generous, open heart. You will discover that your wounding is not a fault or defect, but rather a guiding compass that can lead to greater connectedness. And this will allow you to live more creatively with the tension between love's inherent perfection and relationships' inevitable imperfection. All the ideas and methods in this book have grown out of my own personal experience and research, as well as my work as a psychotherapist. In sharing this material with people in my classes and workshops, I've seen it have a powerful effect on their relations with themselves and others. In a teaching context, experiential exercises provide a way to apply this material to their lives in a concrete personal way and make it their own. Yet, since including exercise in the body of a book can interfere with the flow of the prose, I've chosen to gather some of these exercises with a few important exceptions in a separate section at the back of the book, organized by chapter. If you are so inclined, you can turn to this section and work with exercises after reading each chapter. This will aid you in integrating and incorporating the understandings that you gain along the way. May all beings be happy and at their ease. Through knowing we are held in love, may we find the boundless source of joy within ourselves and share this with the world around us. May we realize our true nature as blissful, radiant love. End of chapter. Introduction.